I hadn't even remembered telling him it was my birthday. The gesture seemed oddly personal from someone who'd only been with the company for 8 months. Pleasant, but unnecessary. I already had plans that evening, dinner with friends, too many cocktails, and honestly, I wasn't much of a whiskey drinker. When Rowan, our CEO, stopped by my office that afternoon to discuss quarterly projections, his eyes immediately landed on the bottle. Well now, what have we here? He picked it up, examining the label with unexpected interest. This is extraordinary. Where did you get this? I shrugged. Birthday gift from Jace. Do you know much about whiskey? Rowan's eyes widened. Kinsley, this is Dalmore Constellation 1964. There are maybe a dozen bottles in existence. His fingers traced the bottle reverently. I've been trying to find one of these for years. An idea struck me. Take it, I said impulsively. Consider it a thank you for your mentorship. His expression transformed like a child receiving an unexpected Christmas gift. Are you certain? This is significant. Absolutely, I smiled. I'm more of a wine person anyway. The next morning, my phone rang. Jace's name flashed on the screen. Good morning, I answered cheerfully. Thanks again for the birthday gift. So, how was the whiskey? His voice had an odd edge I couldn't quite place. Oh, I gave it to Rowan. He loves whiskey and was absolutely thrilled. The silence that followed felt endless. You did what? His voice exploded with such intensity. I pulled the phone away from my ear. The reaction seemed wildly disproportionate. I gave it to our CEO, I repeated calmly. He was impressed by your taste. Actually thanked me personally. More silence. Then, in a voice vibrating with barely controlled emotion, that whiskey cost 3 months of my salary. The call ended abruptly. I sat frozen, phone still in hand. 3 months' salary? That couldn't be right. Jace was a mid-level analyst making decent money. No whiskey could possibly cost that much, could it? I typed the name Rowan had mentioned into my search bar. My stomach contracted as the results loaded. The Dalmore Constellation 1964. Current market value, $38,000. The room seemed to tilt sideways. $38,000? For whiskey? Who spends that kind of money on a bottle of alcohol for their boss? I tried calling Jace back. No answer. I sent a text. Can we talk? I had no idea. Hours passed with no response. When I finally spotted him in the hallway that afternoon, his face was completely devoid of expression. Jace, I'm so sorry. I had absolutely no idea what that bottle was worth. He looked through me as if I were transparent. It's fine. It's not fine. Why would you give me something so valuable? A muscle twitched in his jaw. It doesn't matter now. Please let me make this right. I said it's fine. His voice remained perfectly level, his eyes utterly cold. It was a gift. You were free to do whatever you wanted with it. As he walked away, something in his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders, the measured precision of his steps, sent a chill through me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't learn the full story until weeks later, when Anika from marketing mentioned it casually over lunch. That was quite a power move Jace tried to pull, wasn't it? I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. What power move? Anika looked surprised. The whiskey? The whole Asia-Pacific expansion strategy? Everyone's talking about it. That afternoon, I pieced together what had really happened. The whiskey wasn't just an extravagant gift. It was a carefully orchestrated strategy. Jace had spent 6 months developing an innovative approach to breaking into the Asian market, something our company had been struggling with for years. His plan had been to give me the whiskey, then ask me to arrange a meeting with Rowan where he would present his expansion strategy personally. The rare bottle would have been his foot in the door, an attention-grabbing introduction to showcase his capabilities. Instead, I had handed Rowan both the whiskey and, inadvertently, fragments of Jace's ideas that he'd mentioned during our team meetings. I didn't realize I was basically pitching his concepts as my own. The following week, Rowan invited me to golf, something that had never happened before, to discuss my interesting thoughts on the Asian markets. He was implementing several of Jace's ideas, all attributed to me. If you're still with me on this wild ride, you might want to hit like and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone at the company. The whiskey was just the beginning of a story none of us saw coming. My name is Kinsley Zhao. Until that bottle of whiskey appeared on my desk, I considered myself a good person. Dedicated division manager with a team of 14. Divorced 3 years, no kids. My life revolved around exceeding targets and the occasional weekend with friends. I wasn't particularly close with my team. I believed in maintaining professional boundaries, but I wasn't a monster. At least, that's what I thought. Jace Bennett joined my team after a stellar run at a smaller competitor. His resume was impressive. Graduated top of his class, rapid promotions, innovative approaches to market analysis. He was 32, 7 years younger than me, with an intensity that sometimes made others uncomfortable. He didn't socialize much with the team, but his work was consistently exceptional. What I didn't know about Jace was that the Asian expansion strategy represented everything to him. His grandmother had been born in Hong Kong before immigrating as a teenager. The connections he'd cultivated weren't just business relationships. They were built through distant family members, painstakingly nurtured over years. The whiskey itself had a story. His grandfather had briefly worked at the distillery in his youth, before it became famous. Through that tenuous connection, Jace had located one of the 12 existing bottles. He'd liquidated investment accounts to purchase it, all for a chance to present his strategy personally to Rowan. And I had casually handed it over like it was a $20 bottle from the grocery store. After the whiskey incident, subtle changes began happening around the office. Nothing I could definitively point to, but the atmosphere around me shifted. People stopped talking when I approached. Conversations included references to meetings I couldn't remember attending. During our department update, Jace presented analytics showing an unexpected uptick in our digital engagement metrics. "This is excellent," I said. "Why wasn't I briefed on this initiative?" Jace's expression conveyed polite confusion. "We discussed this 3 weeks ago, Kinsley. You approved the strategy shift during our Tuesday meeting." Several team members nodded in agreement. "I don't recall." "I have the notes here," he said, sliding a document across the table. There it was, detailed minutes showing my apparent enthusiasm for the very approach I was now questioning. Had I forgotten? Was I losing my grip? I prided myself on my memory and attention to detail. Later that week, I received an email from our biggest client requesting that Jace be their primary contact moving forward. When I asked why, their response was cryptic. "We feel our concerns are being addressed more consistently with him." My assistant began scheduling impossible back-to-back meetings across town. Critical emails arrived with key information missing. My presentation slides contained subtle errors I only discovered while delivering them. The Q3 projections show a 14% increase, I confidently told the board, only to hear murmurs as they studied their handouts. "Kinsley, the slide says 4%, Rowan noted, frowning. I looked at the screen. Somehow, the number had changed. I was certain it had read 14% during my preparation. "There must be a technical glitch," I stammered. After the meeting, I checked the file. 14%, clear as day. I began to question my own perception. When I tried to discuss these issues with my supervisor, Elena, she seemed concerned. About me. "Kinsley, are you doing okay? This isn't like you. The scattered approach, the inconsistencies. I think someone is deliberately sabotaging me," I said, immediately regretting how paranoid it sounded. Elena's expression confirmed my fear. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" I didn't. Nothing concrete. Just a growing sense of unease and the cold look in Jace's eyes whenever our gazes met. 3 months after the whiskey incident, Rowan announced a special celebration for our company's 30th anniversary. Each division head would present the CEO with a commemorative gift during an all-hands gathering. I spent weeks planning the perfect present, something that would reset perceptions and remind everyone of my value to the company. I commissioned a custom crystal deal tombstone commemorating our 3 largest acquisitions, with hidden details that represented our company's journey. The day before the celebration, Jace approached my desk. It was the first time he'd initiated a conversation in months. "I've been reflecting on our misunderstanding," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it since that fateful phone call. "I'd like to make amends." Relief washed through me. "I appreciate that, Jace. I truly never meant to be. I know tomorrow's important to you." he continued. I have a connection who might be able to enhance your gift for Rowan. No cost to you. Consider it my olive branch. Could it really be this simple? Part of me remained suspicious, but the larger part desperately wanted to resolve the tension. That's very generous. What did you have in mind? Let me take care of everything, he said with a smile that, for the first time in months, seemed genuine. Trust me, it'll make tomorrow memorable. I hesitated, then nodded. All right, thank you. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Perhaps the strange war between us was finally ending. The celebration arrived with appropriate fanfare. Hundreds of employees gathered in the atrium as division heads presented their gifts. When my turn came, I approached Rowan with confidence. This represents not just our company's achievements, but your visionary leadership, I said, handing him the package. Rowan unwrapped it carefully. His expression shifted from polite interest to shocked recognition as he lifted out not my crystal commemoration, but an identical whiskey bottle to the one Jace had given me months ago. Incredible, he breathed. How did you find another one? The distillery told me only 12 existed worldwide. The room went silent. I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Where was my gift? How was this possible? Before I could form a response, Jace stepped forward from the crowd. Sir, may I? He asked, gently taking the bottle and holding it to the light. I believe this may be a counterfeit. The authentic bottles have a small imperfection in the glass near the seal. This one doesn't. The room grew painfully quiet. Rowan's expression hardened as he looked from the bottle to me. Is this true? He asked. I stammered, unable to respond coherently. My carefully planned moment was disintegrating before hundreds of witnesses. Jace continued calmly, explaining authentication markers with the precision of an expert. The genuine Dalmore constellation has a particular weight to the bottle itself, hand-blown glass with slight variations. The label has microprinting that's nearly impossible to replicate. His fingers traced the bottle's surface. I only know because my grandfather worked at the distillery briefly in his youth. Rowan's gaze had transformed from delight to suspicion. You're saying Kinsley knowingly gave me a fake? I would never presume to know Kinsley's intentions, Jace replied with perfect diplomacy. Perhaps she was misled by whoever sold it to her. The implication hung in the air. I'd either been duped like a fool or was deliberately trying to deceive our CEO. I didn't. This isn't. My voice sounded alien to my own ears. There's been some mistake. Rowan handed the bottle back to me. We'll discuss this privately, he said, his voice tight. He turned to the crowd with a forced smile. Let's continue with the presentations. As people's attention shifted to the next division head, Jace passed by me, leaning close enough that only I could hear. That bottle is actually genuine. But now, whenever anyone sees it in Rowan's cabinet, they'll always wonder, just like you'll always wonder which of your mistakes are really yours. The celebration continued around me while I stood immobilized, the bottle clutched in my hands like a ticking bomb. My mind raced through possibilities. Where was my original gift? How had Jace orchestrated this? Would anyone believe me if I tried to explain? The following weeks became an exercise in professional purgatory. No formal accusations were made, those would have required evidence. But whispers followed me through hallways. My authority eroded through 1,000 microscopic cuts. Rowan's trust in me visibly diminished. My invitations to executive strategy sessions became less frequent. Projects I had once spearheaded were subtly redirected to other managers, never officially reassigned, just gradually shifted through a series of temporary arrangements. Throughout it all, Jace performed flawlessly. His work remained exceptional, his manner respectful. To anyone observing, he appeared to be my most loyal team member, constantly covering gaps in my increasingly disorganized management. Kinsley seems distracted lately, I overheard Elena telling another director. Thank goodness for Jace keeping that department running. I considered confronting him directly, demanding to know his endgame. But what would that accomplish? Without evidence, I'd only appear more unstable. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, documenting everything meticulously, double-checking every communication, arriving earlier and staying later than anyone else. For 3 weeks, my strategy seemed to be working. The whispers quieted, My performance reviews, while not stellar, stabilized. I began to think perhaps the worst was behind me. Then came the Nakamura proposal. Our Japanese client had been considering a substantial expansion of their contract, potentially our biggest deal of the year. I'd been cultivating this relationship for months, carefully laying groundwork. The presentation was scheduled for Monday morning, and I spent the entire weekend perfecting every detail. When I arrived at the office on Monday, Jace was already there, unusually early. "Morning, Kinsley. Coffee?" He held out a cup from my favorite shop. I hesitated before accepting it. "Thank you." "Big day with Nakamura. Anything I can help with?" "I've got it covered," I replied, surprised by the offer. He nodded, smiling. "Of course. Just wanted you to know the team's behind you 100%. The gesture was so unexpected, so normal, that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the entire whiskey saga. Perhaps it had been simple misunderstandings blown out of proportion by my own insecurities. The Nakamura executives arrived precisely on schedule. I greeted them confidently, escorting them to our largest conference room where my presentation awaited. As they settled in, I connected my laptop to the projector. My desktop appeared on screen, but my presentation file was nowhere to be found. "Just a moment," I said, navigating through folders with increasing panic. The file I had finalized last night, 64 meticulously crafted slides, had vanished. Sweat beaded along my hairline as I searched frantically. The executives shifted uncomfortably. I could feel their confidence in me evaporating with each passing second. Just as I was about to apologize for the delay, Jace appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right?" he asked, the picture of concerned professionalism. "I can't locate the presentation file," I admitted quietly. "That's strange." He frowned. "Would you like me to check if it's on the shared drive? Perhaps you saved it there as backup." I nodded gratefully. Within minutes, he returned with a USB drive. "Found a version from last week," he explained. "It might not have your latest updates, but it's better than nothing." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you," I whispered as he plugged in the drive. The presentation opened flawlessly. All my latest data, all my carefully crafted transitions. It was my complete file, not an older version. How had it disappeared from my computer only to reappear on the shared drive? I pushed the question aside, focusing on delivering a compelling pitch. The Nakamura executives seemed impressed. Questions followed, deep and engaged. I began to relax, feeling the presentation turning in my favor. Then came the budget slide. "As you can see," I said confidently, "our proposal fits comfortably within your stated parameters, with a 10% contingency built in for unexpected developments." The lead executive leaned forward, frowning. "These figures differ significantly from what we discussed last week." I blinked in confusion. "Last week?" "Yes. During our preliminary call, your colleague Jace provided a breakdown that was considerably more favorable." My heart seemed to stop. I wasn't aware of any preliminary call. The room grew uncomfortably silent. The executive pulled out his phone, checking something. "Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. We spoke for 40 minutes. He indicated he was calling on your behalf since you were in another meeting." I had no recollection of authorizing such a call. Worse, the figures they were expecting were completely unrealistic. No way we could deliver at those rates without taking a loss. "There appears to be some internal miscommunication," I said carefully. "Perhaps we should take a short break while I consult with my team." In the hallway, Jace was waiting, his expression concerned. "How's it going? You had a call with Nakamura last week?" I kept my voice level with effort. "Yes, the preliminary discussion you asked me to handle. I sent you the summary afterward." He pulled out his phone, showing me an email I had no memory of receiving. "They were particularly interested in the alternative pricing structure we discussed in our strategy session." "We never discussed an alternative pricing structure." His expression shifted to careful confusion. "Kinsley, we spent nearly 2 hours on it last Thursday. The entire team was there." He glanced at his watch. "Should I gather everyone to help clarify this for Nakamura?" The trap was perfectly laid. If I insisted no such meeting occurred, I would appear completely disconnected from my own department. If I accused Jace of lying, I'd seem paranoid and unprofessional in front of our most important potential client. That won't be necessary, I said finally. Let's just focus on salvaging this presentation. By afternoon, the damage was done. Nakamura signed a modified agreement, significantly less profitable than my original proposal, with a specific request that Jace serve as their primary contact moving forward. The pattern continued with maddening subtlety. Clients began specifically requesting Jace. My access to certain systems inexplicably failed at critical moments. Calendar invitations disappeared. Important emails arrived in my spam folder instead of my inbox. Each isolated incident could be explained away as a technical glitch or simple miscommunication. Together, they formed a devastating pattern that was impossible to prove but increasingly impossible to ignore. At night, I lay awake trying to understand Jace's endgame. If he wanted my position, he could have had it by now. Rowan clearly valued his input more than mine. Yet he seemed content to remain in my shadow, gradually hollowing out my authority while maintaining the appearance of loyal support. 6 months after the whiskey incident, opportunity arrived in the form of our annual leadership retreat, 3 days at a mountain resort, focused on strategic planning for the coming year. I was surprised to receive an invitation. My star had fallen so far that inclusion didn't seem guaranteed. When I mentioned this to Elena during our weekly check-in, she seemed puzzled. Why wouldn't you be included? Your division's numbers have actually improved this quarter. This was news to me. Have they? Significantly. Particularly in the APAC region, up 18%. Rowan specifically mentioned how impressed he was with the turnaround. Hope flickered to life. Perhaps my careful documentation and diligent work were finally paying off. Maybe I could still salvage my reputation and position. The retreat began with the usual team-building exercises and strategy sessions. I approached each activity with renewed determination, contributing thoughtfully and reconnecting with colleagues I'd withdrawn from during my months of suspicion and self-doubt. On the second evening, Rowan invited several of us to his suite for informal drinks and conversation. To my surprise, he greeted me warmly. Kinsley, just the person I wanted to speak with. Your Asia-Pacific numbers are remarkable. I'd like to hear more about how you've achieved such growth despite the regulatory challenges. For a moment, I hesitated. The Asia strategy had been Jace's originally, the very one I'd inadvertently presented as my own after the whiskey gift. But in the months since, I'd actually developed my own approach, building on some of his ideas but adding substantive innovations. It's been a multifaceted approach, I began, outlining the framework I'd implemented. Rowan listened intently, asking insightful questions. Others joined our conversation, and for the first time in months, I felt my confidence returning. This was why I had succeeded in the first place. My strategic thinking, my ability to navigate complex market dynamics. Later that evening, as people began drifting back to their rooms, Rowan pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I allowed rumors and perceptions to color my judgment of your capabilities. That was unfair. Thank you for saying that, I replied, emotion tightening my throat. It's been a challenging period. I'd like you to present your Asia-Pacific strategy to the full executive team next month. If it's as solid as it sounds, we may want to implement elements across other regions. I walked back to my room feeling lighter than I had in months. Perhaps the nightmare was finally ending. Perhaps I could rebuild after all. My room keycard wouldn't work. 3 attempts, and the light remained stubbornly red. Exhausted but still buoyed by the evening's success, I made my way to the front desk. I'm so sorry, Ms. Zhao, the night manager said, after trying to reprogram my card without success. It appears there's an issue with the electronic lock on your room. Our maintenance staff has gone for the night, but we can move you to another room immediately. 20 minutes later, I entered my new room, larger than the original, with a stunning mountain view. A complimentary bottle of wine sat on the desk with a note apologizing for the inconvenience. I changed into pajamas and was about to call it a night when my phone chimed with a text message from Rowan. Almost forgot to mention, bring your distribution timeline to breakfast. Want to review before the 9 a.m. session. I opened my laptop to locate the file he wanted, then froze. Every document, every spreadsheet, every presentation I had prepared for the retreat was gone. My entire work folder had been wiped clean. Panic surged through me. I had backups on my external drive, but that was in my original room, the room I could no longer access. I called the front desk. I need to get into my previous room. I left something important. I'm afraid that's not possible tonight, Ms. Zhao. The electronic lock is completely malfunctioning. That's why we had to relocate you. Maintenance will address it first thing in the morning. Morning would be too late. I needed those files for breakfast with Rowan. I considered my options. I could email Jace, ask him to send me copies of the most critical documents. The thought made me nauseous, but I was desperate. As I reached for my phone, it chimed again. A text from an unknown number. Looking for your files? Check your email. Seconds later, an email arrived from an anonymous address. The subject line read, "What you lost and what you took." Attached was a compressed folder containing all my missing documents, along with something else. A video file titled WatchMe.mp4. My hands trembling slightly, I clicked play. The video began playing, showing the conference room at our headquarters. The timestamp in the corner showed a date from 6 months ago, the day after I'd given Jace's whiskey to Rowan. I recognized myself sitting at the head of the table, leading what appeared to be a routine team meeting. But I had no memory of this specific meeting. The camera angle suggested it was filmed from someone's laptop, partially obscured as if recording secretly. The audio was crystal clear. On screen, I was speaking, "Exceptional work Jace has done on the Asia-Pacific strategy. I've already shared the preliminary concepts with Rowan, who is very impressed." My blood ran cold. I had never said those words. The video continued, showing me apparently taking credit for Jace's work, explaining my strategy for Asian market penetration, details that matched exactly what Jace had been developing before the whiskey incident. The meeting participants nodded along, occasionally glancing at Jace, whose face remained carefully neutral. "This can't be real," I whispered to the empty room. But it looked real, sounded real. My mannerisms, my voice inflections, all perfect, yet the entire meeting was fabricated. A sophisticated deepfake that would convince anyone who viewed it that I had deliberately stolen Jace's work and presented it as my own. The video continued for nearly 40 minutes, documenting a meeting that never happened. Throughout, the manufactured version of me repeatedly emphasized how I had developed these strategies independently, occasionally acknowledging Jace's minor contributions with condescending praise. When it finally ended, another video automatically began playing. This one showed me in Rowan's office, apparently the same day. The angle suggested a hidden camera. The whiskey was just to get your attention. My digital doppelganger said smoothly, "The real gift is this strategy. Jace doesn't have the experience to present it properly, so I decided to handle it myself." Rowan nodded appreciatively in the video. "Smart move. The boy has potential but lacks your strategic vision." "Exactly," the fake me replied. "He's useful for data analysis, but this level of market strategy requires a more seasoned perspective." I closed the laptop with shaking hands. The implications were staggering. If these videos were shared, with HR, with the executive team, with clients, my career wouldn't just be damaged. It would be obliterated. The phone chimed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Enjoying the show? There's more where that came from. Much more." I tried calling the number. No answer. I considered calling Rowan, trying to explain, but what would I say? That someone had created elaborate, completely convincing videos showing me doing exactly what I'd been suspected of all along? Sleep was impossible. I spent the night reviewing every document in the recovered folder, ensuring they were intact for the morning meeting. Among them, I discovered dozens of emails I'd supposedly sent but had no recollection of writing, all containing subtle undermining of other executives, inappropriate comments about clients, or veiled criticisms of Rowan's leadership. By dawn, the picture was horrifyingly clear. For 6 months, Jace had been constructing an elaborate alternative reality, one where I was not just incompetent but actively malicious. He had created a digital trail of evidence showing me stealing his work, sabotaging colleagues, and manipulating clients. And no one would question it because the foundation, my casual handover of his whiskey to Rowan, established a pattern of behavior that made everything else believable. At breakfast, I handed Rowan the distribution timeline he'd requested, my mind racing with possible ways to address what I'd discovered. Before I could formulate an approach, Jace appeared, greeting us both with his now familiar professional warmth. "Morning, Kinsley. Sleep well in your new room?" His smile revealed nothing, but his eyes held a gleam of satisfaction. "Fine, thank you," I replied mechanically. "I heard about the lock malfunction," Rowan said. "Inconvenient timing." Jace nodded sympathetically. "Technology can be so unreliable sometimes. Speaking of which, did you get a chance to review those projections I sent over, Rowan? The ones showing the potential impact of implementing Kinsley's Asia strategy across other regions?" My strategy. He was calling it my strategy now, establishing public attribution that would make the fake videos even more damning when they eventually surfaced. The day proceeded with excruciating normalcy. Strategy sessions, breakout discussions, presentations from other divisions. Throughout, Jace performed flawlessly as my supportive lieutenant, deferring to me publicly while subtly positioning himself as the real authority. During the afternoon break, I escaped to a secluded terrace overlooking the mountains. I needed space to think, to plan. The anonymous texts had stopped, but the threat remained. When would the videos be released? To whom? And what could I possibly do to counter such convincing evidence? "Beautiful view," a voice said behind me. Anika from marketing approached, coffee in hand. "Mind if I join you?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me, grateful for the distraction. "You seem distracted today," she observed after a moment. "Everything okay?" I considered deflecting but found myself too exhausted to maintain the pretense. "Not really. I've discovered something troubling about Jace," she asked quietly. My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Annika sipped her coffee, considering her words carefully. "There have been patterns, things that didn't quite add up." She set her cup down. "I worked with him at his previous company. Did you know that?" I hadn't known. Nothing in his personnel file indicated they'd worked together. "He was brilliant there too," she continued. "Innovative, hardworking. His division manager took credit for one of his projects, a minor one, nothing like your situation with the whiskey. But afterward," she trailed off, shaking her head. "What happened?" The manager's career imploded. Slowly at first. Small mistakes, miscommunications, then bigger problems. Eventually, he was let go for incompetence. Jace was promoted into his position. My mouth went dry. "You think it wasn't coincidental?" She shrugged. "I had suspicions, but no proof. And honestly, the manager wasn't well liked. Few people questioned his downfall." She leaned closer. "But the similarities to what's been happening with you, it's uncanny. Why are you telling me this now? Because last night, I received an anonymous email containing videos of you saying things I'm fairly certain you never said." Her eyes met mine steadily. "The sender suggested I should consider who I align myself with very carefully." My heart raced. "You received the videos too?" She nodded. "I suspect others did as well. The question is, why now? Why at the retreat?" The answer hit me with sudden clarity. The retreat wasn't just a corporate planning session. It was an evaluation period for upcoming organizational changes. Decisions about promotions, restructuring, leadership roles for the coming year would all be influenced by interactions and impressions formed here. "He's positioning for something big," I murmured. "The videos discredit me just as Rowan is reconsidering my value." Anika nodded. "That would be my guess. But Kinsley?" She hesitated. "These videos are incredibly convincing. Without knowing you personally, I might have believed them myself. What can I possibly do against something like this?" She considered the question seriously. "You need to change the narrative. Right now, everything fits the story he's created. You took credit for his work after carelessly giving away his whiskey. Your subsequent failures and his successes reinforce that narrative." She leaned forward. "What if you could establish a counter-narrative that makes people question his entire framework?" A glimmer of an idea began forming in my mind. "I need access to our company servers." "For what?" "To understand exactly how deep this goes." The remainder of the retreat passed in a blur of strategic planning, not the company's, but my own. I participated in sessions, contributed to discussions, all while processing what I'd discovered and formulating my response. More anonymous emails circulated subtly among attendees, never sent to everyone at once, but strategically distributed to create maximum impact with minimum traceability. By the final dinner, I could feel the shift in how people interacted with me. Subtle distancing, conversations that stopped when I approached. Jace, meanwhile, received increasing attention from Rowan and other executives. His insights were solicited, his contributions praised. He maintained his supportive demeanor toward me publicly, but his eyes held the satisfaction of someone watching their master plan unfold perfectly. The final morning, Rowan announced a significant reorganization effective immediately upon our return to headquarters. Several promotions and lateral moves designed to optimize our organizational structure for the challenges ahead. I held my breath, waiting for my demotion or reassignment. Instead, Rowan announced, Kinsley will be taking on expanded responsibilities, overseeing both her current division and our new special projects unit. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. No one was more shocked than I was, except perhaps Jace, whose careful composure slipped momentarily before he recovered. Additionally, Rowan continued, Jace will be promoted to Senior Strategy Director, reporting directly to me. There it was, the culmination of his 6-month campaign. Not my position, but something potentially better. Direct access to the CEO, bypassing the traditional hierarchy entirely. As people congratulated both of us, Jace approached with his practiced smile. Congratulations, Kinsley. Well deserved. Thank you, I replied. And congratulations on your new role. Working directly with Rowan is a significant opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. His eyes studied me, perhaps searching for signs of defeat or resentment. I smiled pleasantly. We should have a drink to celebrate when we get back. I believe I owe you a bottle of whiskey. For the first time since this began, I saw genuine surprise flash across his face. That would be appropriate. 3 days later, back at headquarters, I sent Jace a calendar invitation. Celebration drinks, my office, 7 p.m. He accepted within minutes. That evening, he arrived precisely on time. My office lights were dimmed, a single lamp illuminating the 2 whiskey glasses on my desk and the familiar bottle between them, an exact duplicate of the one he had given me 6 months earlier. You found another Dalmor constellation, he observed, impressed despite himself. I have my resources, I replied, gesturing for him to sit. Cost me 3 months' salary, but some things are worth the investment. His lips quirked in appreciation of the callback to our fateful phone conversation. Indeed they are. I poured 2 fingers in each glass, sliding one toward him. To new beginnings. He raised his glass slightly. To getting what we deserve. We both drank. The whiskey burned pleasantly going down, warming my chest. You know, I said conversationally, I've been thinking about our journey these past 6 months. It's been educational. How so? He seemed relaxed now, perhaps believing this meeting signaled my acceptance of defeat. I've learned how easily reality can be manipulated, how thin the line is between perception and truth. I sipped again. For instance, most people don't realize how comprehensive our internal security systems are. His expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his glass. Our IT infrastructure captures everything, Jace. Every login, every file access, every email, even those that appear to be deleted. Every use of company equipment, on-site or remote. I leaned forward slightly, including every instance when someone uses advanced video manipulation software on our servers. The first hint of uncertainty crossed his face. That's thorough. It is. But what's really interesting is how these systems correlate data. For example, they can identify when someone accesses my calendar through a backdoor protocol, then creates appointment conflicts. Or when someone uses my login credentials from a different device while I'm simultaneously logged in elsewhere. I opened my desk drawer, removing a flash drive. This contains 6 months of forensic evidence documenting every digital manipulation you've orchestrated, every fake email, every altered document, every fabricated video, all traced directly back to your devices and access credentials. His expression hardened. That's absurd. You're bluffing. Am I? I connected the drive to my laptop, turning the screen so he could see. This is footage from the security camera in the main server room, showing you installing something on the primary file server at 2:17 a.m., 3 weeks after the whiskey incident. And this, I clicked to another file, is the log showing the installation of sophisticated deepfake software on a partitioned section of the company server, accessed exclusively through your credentials. His face remained impassive, but sweat had begun to bead at his temples. Even if any of this were true, which it isn't, no one would believe you over me at this point. You've seen the videos. Your credibility is shot. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. You see, I haven't been working alone. On cue, my office door opened. Rowan entered, followed by Elena and two people Jace didn't recognize, our head of IT security and the company's chief legal counsel. Hello, Jace, Rowan said, his voice chillingly formal. We need to discuss your creative use of company resources. Jace's eyes darted between us, calculating rapidly. Whatever Kinsley's told you isn't relevant, Rowan interrupted. The evidence speaks for itself. We've been monitoring your activities for weeks. The only question remaining is whether we handle this internally or involve the authorities. Jace's carefully constructed facade cracked completely. You can't possibly have... He stopped abruptly, reassessing. I was just trying to protect the company from incompetent leadership. Everything I did was for the benefit of... Include... Save it, Elena said sharply. We've seen enough to know exactly what your motivations were. As the legal team explained the consequences he was facing, immediate termination, potential criminal charges for computer fraud, contractual violations, I watched the man who had nearly destroyed my career confront the collapse of his elaborate scheme. When they finally escorted him out, Rowan remained behind. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have trusted my initial judgment of your character. I shook my head. His manipulation was incredibly sophisticated. If Annika hadn't recognized the pattern from his previous company, if IT hadn't been able to trace his digital footprints, I gestured to the whiskey bottle still sitting on my desk. All of this because I didn't understand the value of what I was carelessly giving away. Rowan picked up the bottle, examining it thoughtfully. Is this really another Dalmor constellation? I smiled. No. It's a $30 replica with a carefully reproduced label. Some things aren't worth 3 months' salary after all. He laughed, setting it down. The special projects position is real, by the way. I'd like you to consider taking it exclusively rather than dividing your attention. After seeing how you handled this situation, I believe your talents might be better utilized in a more strategic role. After he left, I sat alone in my office, contemplating the replica whiskey bottle that had helped me reclaim my narrative. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jace's entire revenge scheme had been built around creating convincing fakes, and in the end, he was undone by his inability to distinguish a fake from the genuine article. I poured the remaining whiskey down the sink, then placed the empty bottle in my credenza as a reminder. Some gifts come with hidden costs, and some revenge plots consume their creators. If you've made it to the end of this wild ride, I hope it's taught you what it taught me, that perception can be weaponized, but truth eventually finds its way to the surface. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want more stories about workplace revenge gone wrong, or sometimes, when justice demands it, gone exactly right.